Dear God, I know that you can hear me. Please, give me a mom and a dad, so I could have a family. Love, Desiree.
Desiree, a wisp of a girl barely 10, believed in God with an unshakable faith. It was a peculiar, almost defiant light in the otherwise stark reality of the St. Jude's orphanage. Every morning, before the chaotic clang of breakfast trays, she'd sit on the cold, chipped concrete steps, her gaze fixed on the dirt road. She wasn't waiting for a ride to school or even a new toy. She was waiting for Mike, the mailman. Mike, with his perpetually rumpled uniform and kind eyes, was her conduit to the divine. "Morning, Desiree," he'd call out, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Morning, Mike," she'd chirp back, holding out a carefully folded piece of paper. It was always addressed in painstaking, childish block letters. "To God in heaven." The other orphans, a jaded lot hardened by rejection, found her ritual endlessly amusing. "Still writing to your imaginary friend, Desiree?" sneered Thomas, a lanky boy 2 years her senior. "God doesn't deliver mail here." Laughter would ripple through the small yard, echoing the same old taunts she'd heard every year on her birthday. Amidst their jeers, she'd whisper the same fervent wish, blowing out invisible candles, for God to find her mommy and daddy. She clung to the belief that somewhere out there they were looking for her too, and God would surely bring them together. But hope, even for the most steadfast, can fray. The laughter of the other kids began to chip away at Desiree's resolve. Every few months, another child would pack their meager belongings, a nervous smile on their face, destined for a new life, a new family. Each departure was a tiny shard of glass in Desiree's heart. She'd wave goodbye, a forced smile on her lips, then retreat to her corner of the dormitory, the familiar knot of despair tightening in her chest. Was there something wrong with her? Why did no one want her? The letters to God became less frequent and stopped altogether. The orphanage steps, once her sacred perch, lay empty of her small, waiting figure in the mornings. Mike, noticing her absence, felt a pang of concern that deepened with each passing day. He'd pause by the steps, a package of undelivered joy in his hand, and sigh. Across the yard, Shekinah, a compassionate caregiver with a gentle demeanor, often watched Desiree from the kitchen window. She'd seen the light in the girl's eyes dim, replaced by a profound sadness that seemed too heavy for such a small frame. "She's fading, Mike," Shekinah murmured to him one afternoon, her voice hushed with worry. "She's lost her spark." Thousands of miles away, in a sprawling, elegant home, Madeline existed in a perpetual twilight of grief. Her late 30s had become a landscape of tears, a constant battle with a conscience ravaged by a past tragedy. Every object in the house, every scent, every sound, seemed to whisper the name of her baby girl. The fire, the inferno that had consumed their home, and with it, her precious child. She blamed herself relentlessly. The flames of self-blame still scorched her soul, leaving her hollowed out, a ghost in her own life. She rarely left her room, the curtains drawn against the harsh daylight. Meals went untouched, her once vibrant spirit replaced by a quiet, suffocating despair. Her husband Jackson, a man forged of immense understanding and boundless patience, watched her with a breaking heart. He tried everything: therapy, trips, gentle persuasion. But Madeline remained unreachable, trapped in her self-imposed prison of guilt. Jackson, desperate, made a decision. He hired Angela, a woman in her 60s with a gentle smile and a voice as soft as a prayer. Angela wasn't a therapist, but she possessed a quiet strength, an innate empathy that Jackson hoped might reach his wife. Madeline, initially resistant to the intrusion, found herself oddly comforted by Angela's presence. Angela didn't push, didn't lecture, she simply was. She'd sit by Madeline's bed, knitting in comfortable silence, or hum soft lullabies. Slowly, imperceptibly, a fragile connection formed. Angela would bring her warm tea, comb her tangled hair, and sometimes, just sometimes, Madeline would speak a few words, tears welling in her eyes as she recounted snippets of her bitter past. Angela would listen, her gaze unwavering, and then in her soft, encouraging voice, she would offer not just comfort but fervent prayers. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, child," Angela would often say, her hand gently patting Madeline's. "His plan is greater than our understanding." Madeline, a woman who had lost all faith, found herself, against her will, drawing a strange, hesitant strength from Angela's unwavering conviction. Meanwhile, in a grimy, secluded apartment not far from the city's bustling center, Gary and Lily stewed in a simmering cauldron of resentment. Their faces, etched with a mean-spirited cunning, reflected years of simmering hatred for Jackson. "He thought he could just fire us and forget about it," Gary snarled, clenching his fist. "The high and mighty Jackson Vance. We built his empire, and he tossed us aside like trash." Lily, her eyes glinting with a cold malice, traced patterns on a dusty table. He paid for it, didn't he? That precious little life, gone in a puff of smoke. They spoke in veiled terms, their words hinting at a dark history, a past act of vengeance that had brought them perverse satisfaction. They often drove past the Vance estate, their faces obscured by tinted windows, observing Jackson and Madeline's grief with a grim satisfaction. Their plan, a monstrous lie they'd carefully crafted, remained their most guarded secret. And it was a secret they were determined to protect at all costs. Back at St. Jude's, the concern for Desiree had reached a critical point. She was a hollowed-out version of her former self. She no longer played with the younger children, her once bright eyes now dull and distant. Mike and Shekinah exchanged worried glances almost constantly. One particularly dreary afternoon, they watched her from a distance. She sat beneath an old, gnarled oak tree, her small frame radiating an unbearable sadness, a profound weariness that chilled them both to the bone. She wasn't just sad, she seemed to have lost the will to live, her very spirit dimming with each passing day. "Mike," Shekinah whispered, her voice tight with urgency, "we have to do something before it's too late. I don't know how much more she can take." Mike nodded, his jaw set. A desperate resolve hardened his features. The time for passive observation was over. The next morning, the orphanage felt colder, emptier. Dustin, her best friend, was gone. Adopted by a family who promised him a dog and a backyard swing, Desiree had waved goodbye, a brave but brittle smile plastered on her face, but inside, something had irrevocably snapped. The last thread of hope, stretched thin over a decade of disappointment, finally broke. That afternoon, while the other children were engrossed in a particularly boisterous game of tag, Desiree slipped away, her small backpack, a tattered relic containing only a worn teddy bear and a crumpled drawing of a stick figure family, felt impossibly heavy on her shoulders. She walked for hours, her small legs burning, until the familiar, drab streets of her orphanage neighborhood gave way to manicured lawns and stately homes. This was a different world, quiet and opulent, a place she had only ever seen in magazines. Exhaustion gnawed at her, but a fierce, desperate determination fueled her forward. She had to find them. God, she believed, had simply forgotten the address. Desiree wandered deeper into the high-end residential neighborhood, the grand houses looming like silent, imposing sentinels. A sudden sweet scent of blooming roses stopped her. It wafted from a sprawling garden, meticulously kept, where a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile was tending to a rose bush. It was Angela, humming softly to herself. Angela looked up, her gaze falling on the small, weary girl standing uncertainly by the gate. There was a fragile vulnerability in Desiree's posture that tugged at Angela's heart. "Hello there, little one," Angela said, her voice warm as the afternoon sun. "You look a bit lost. Are you all right?" Desiree, unused to such immediate warmth from a stranger, simply nodded, too tired to speak. "You look like you could use something to warm you up," Angela continued, her smile unwavering. "Would you like some hot chocolate and cookies? My oven just chimed." The thought of warmth and kindness was irresistible. Desiree nodded shyly, her eyes wide. As she followed Angela towards the stately house, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time, a tiny spark of comfort in the vast ocean of her despair. Inside the large sunlit kitchen, the aroma of chocolate and baking cookies filled the air. Angela bustled about, pouring hot chocolate into a mug adorned with colorful butterflies. Desiree sat at the large polished table, feeling a strange mix of apprehension and awe. Suddenly, a woman's face appeared in a sunlit window overlooking the garden. It was Madeline. She had been watching Angela's movements, a dull ache in her chest. But then her eyes fell upon the small girl at the table, and her breath hitched. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a forgotten rhythm igniting within her. The girl's face, the way her hair fell, a ghost of a memory screamed in Madeline's mind. "Maggie?" Madeline whispered, her voice barely a breath yet laced with an almost manic joy. "Is that you, Maggie?" Desiree, bewildered, watched as Madeline rushed into the kitchen, her eyes fixed on Desiree with an intensity that was both unsettling and profoundly tender. Madeline's hands trembled as she reached out, touching Desiree's face, tracing the contours of her cheek. "You're here. You're finally here." Tears streamed down Madeline's face, but they were tears of raw, overwhelming relief. She pinned Desiree into a tight embrace, holding her as if she were afraid she might vanish into thin air. "Don't let her go, Angela," Madeline pleaded, her voice choked with emotion. "Don't let her go." Angela, witnessing this extraordinary reunion, felt a profound sense of awe. She looked heavenward, her eyes glistening, and whispered, "Thank you, Father." It was a prayer of quiet, triumphant gratitude. When Jackson returned home later that evening, the change that greeted him was nothing short of miraculous. The drawn curtains in Madeline's room were open, letting in the last rays of the setting sun. More astonishingly, laughter, light and genuine, drifted from the kitchen. Madeline was there, her eyes no longer vacant, but alive, sparkling with a joy he hadn't seen in years. She was talking animatedly to a small, unfamiliar girl. "Jackson, look," Madeline exclaimed, her voice bright with a forgotten melody. "She came back. Our Maggie came back." Jackson, though initially confused, saw the life rekindled in his wife's eyes. He saw hope, a long-lost friend, return to their home, radiating from the small figure of the girl. He didn't understand the sudden shift, but he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his soul that something profoundly good had happened. The suffocating pall of grief that had haunted their lives for so long seemed to lift, replaced by a fragile yet potent sense of renewed promise. The news traveled fast, albeit distortedly, through the city's undercurrents. Gary and Lily, in their squalid apartment, caught wind of it. Jackson Vance's grief-stricken wife had inexplicably found a child. Their informant, oblivious to the true significance, painted a picture of domestic bliss. But for Gary and Lily, the pieces clicked into place with a horrifying jolt. "No," Gary breathed, his face contorted in a mask of disbelief and then incandescent rage. "It can't be, the fire." She was gone, Lily's eyes narrowed, a cold, predatory glint entering them. "Unless she wasn't, Gary. Unless that little orphan is her. Our perfect little revenge, ruined." The thought that their meticulous act of destruction had somehow failed, that the very child they believed they had erased from existence was now in Jackson's home, ignited a furious, vengeful fire within them. The laughter from the Vance estate, overheard by their sources, was a personal insult. They would not let this stand. Their secret, a monstrous lie they'd carefully crafted, was now dangerously exposed. They were angry, and their anger spelled danger for Desiree. Back at St. Jude's, the news of Desiree's disappearance had thrown the orphanage into a frenzy. Police had been notified, and a search was underway, but Mike and Shekinah felt a chilling dread that official channels wouldn't be enough. They knew Desiree too well. Her quiet desperation, her unwavering faith. She wouldn't just run aimlessly, Mike mused, pacing the small office. She was looking for something, someone. Shekinah, remembering Desiree's countless letters and her fervent prayers, had a sudden, profound intuition. She was looking for her parents, Mike. She truly believed God would lead her. There was a quiet conviction in Shekinah's voice, a sense that something beyond human understanding was at play. "We need to look beyond the usual places. We need to trust our instincts." Mike, a man of simple faith himself, nodded. He didn't know how or why, but he felt a pull, a strange sense of urgency drawing him towards an unknown destination, an invisible thread connecting him to the lost girl. They were driven by an unshakable instinct, unknowingly moving closer to Desiree's new, perilous sanctuary, ready to fulfill a role they hadn't even consciously accepted. The peace that had tentatively settled over the Vance home was brutally shattered. Under the cloak of night, Gary and Lily, their faces contorted by a vengeful fury, crept onto the sprawling property. They had used their old knowledge of the house's layout, a chilling familiarity from their past employment under Jackson, to bypass the initial security. Their target, Desiree. Desiree, nestled in a plush bed for the first time in her life, was dreaming of hot chocolate and the gentle touch of a mother. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked. Her eyes fluttered open to see two looming figures silhouetted against the moonlight seeping through the window. Fear, cold and immediate, seized her. Madeline, restless with a newfound anxiety that night, had risen for a glass of water. As she neared Desiree's room, she heard a muffled gasp. Her heart leapt into her throat. Pushing the door open, she saw the two intruders, their hands outstretched towards Desiree's bed. A primal protective roar tore from Madeline's throat. "Get away from her," she shrieked, no longer the broken woman, but a fierce lioness defending her cub. She lunged forward, her body acting purely on instinct. Just as Gary snarled and raised a hand, a force like an invisible shield seemed to ripple through the room. Suddenly, the figures of Mike and Angela appeared in the doorway. Their faces are bright and blinding lights around them. Madeline and Desiree was in awe. Their presence wasn't just physical. It carried an undeniable weight, an aura of protective power. Mike whispered, "Don't be afraid. My name is Michael. I'm an angel." His eyes are kind and his smile is gentle. He stepped in front of Madeline and Desiree. Angela looked lovingly at Madeline. "God knows your pain, Madeline. He's there with you all along." Angela's face was beaming, and a beautiful wings appeared on her side. You are also an angel?" whispered Madeline. Angela nodded. Madeline's tears welled up on her face. The commanding presence of Michael and Angela, coupled with a strange, unyielding force that emanated from them, seemed to disorient Gary. Lily, startled, stumbled backward, her face paling. Angela, her calm demeanor replaced by an unwavering resolve, extended a hand, not to strike, but as if to push back an unseen malevolence. A palpable wave of dread washed over Gary and Lily. This wasn't just human opposition. There was something profoundly other about Mike and Angela tonight. A deep, irrational fear seized them. They recoiled, their faces etched with terror, scrambling backward and fleeing into the night as if pursued by unseen spirits. Their dark intentions thwarted, they vanished, their whispers of revenge swallowed by the wind. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Madeline's ragged breaths and Desiree's soft whimpers. Jackson, awakened by the commotion, rushed into the room, his face a mixture of alarm and confusion. He found Madeline clutching Desiree, both trembling but safe, and Mike and Angela had vanished into thin air. The ordeal, terrifying as it was, solidified an undeniable truth. Desiree was their Maggie, confirmed not just by Madeline's heart, but by the desperate, thwarted efforts of Gary and Lily, the very people responsible for the fire that had stolen her years ago. The truth, however painful, set them free. Finally, Desiree, no longer an orphan, was truly home. In the loving embrace of Madeline and Jackson, she found not just a family, but a love that transcended time, loss, and the darkest of betrayals. The angels, Mike and Angela, had played their part, guiding destiny and protecting innocence, proving that some miracles arrive not with fanfare, but with quiet, unwavering faith and timely intervention. Faith, even when tested, can lead to miraculous outcomes, and that even in the darkest of times, hope and true love will ultimately triumph over deception and despair. Sometimes, the most powerful interventions come from unexpected places and unexpected people, guided by a higher purpose.
Youth on the Rock. Jesus is the rock. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel.